Sina, for the introduction, and thanks a lot for inviting us here. It's a great honor for us. Maybe a bit of context. So my name is Florian. I have an academic background. I've done my PhD in design research with a focus on sustainability. So it's a bit farther away from the UX field. But I've worked in UX and CX and all different kinds of contexts. And now I'm heading the research team at KISKA. And my colleague.
So I'm Alicia. I grew up in France, but now I'm at KISKA in Austria. I work here as a UX researcher, and I have a master's in product design and also experience working as a UX designer and researcher for a medtech startup.
So what we want to talk about today is basically the new research approach that we're having embedded at KISKA. I haven't been here for that long, so I joined last year in August. Yeah, August, don't say, yeah. And we've been kind of steering or redirecting the way that research is done here. And this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to give you a quick introduction to into the agency, and we're going to show you the approach as well as a couple of project examples. So keep in mind, mixed methods approach, it's not nothing new, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's something that that we feel in our context is very valuable. So going on, if it works. So KISKA is basically 4 studios worldwide. You just mentioned it's a brand and design agency. We design brands that are usually centered around a product, but that's also shifting and expanding. Our headquarters is actually almost in the middle of the mountains in Austria, in Salzburg. But we also got studios in China, in the US, and in Munich. That's why we thought it would be good for us to also join UX Research Munich. It's an international team. We've got about 250, 260 creative minds here from different areas, different backgrounds, with a very hands-on approach, but also a very strategic approach. So it's kind of a all-around approach.
Florian?
Yes.
For the interruption. I don't know, like maybe something with the sound quality is like we're having a little problem. So we hear a lot of background noise. I don't know if you maybe can switch your microphone or something. Like if you have an option, this would be great, I think.
Yes. Better now.
If not, it works like this, but we just have like a background noise, but.
Okay. Yeah, that. Let's see. Is it a bit better now?
Yeah, much better.
Sorry about this. Yeah.
No problem. Sorry for interrupting you. Thanks.
Right, no problem. So basically, we work around a variety of projects, brands, services, and products that kind of range from mobility to websites. So projects range in a space between the physical and digital experiences, although KISKA itself clearly comes from the physical and the design side. And so in our work, we are ideally going into long-term partnerships, where it's on building brands or redirecting brands. And you can see some of the examples of prototyping in the interaction space that we do. And so it's a very, very broad approach, very broad setup that we have. On our setup, so we always, as a research team, we always work in collaboration with other teams, because we have a very wide range of disciplines in our agency. We kind of have to adapt to everyone every time. That's very, very interesting. So we have product design, brand strategy, but also digital product design, transportation design. And so it's kind of ranging from the more strategic to the more hands-on discipline, all working together. So kind of collaborative creativity going on there. And for us as a research team, we always believe that that research needs to be at the foundation of every project, just also to ensure its relevance for users and for the market. And the way that we set up our team, so we're a really, really small team, small research team, but we set it up in a way where we basically interface with each of the disciplines that are in-house with us. So that's our setup. Doing research in this context is actually quite challenging because you're faced with multidisciplinary teams that sometimes just speak a different language. You might know that if you work in a larger agency. So it's always, you have to get on the same level, on the common ground. And that's what we try to provide through research. Because obviously we want to be, we want to be partnering with the other teams in-house. So in that sense, for us, in an increasingly complex world, research for us can provide a bit of clarity. And we're not only talking about the UX research, that's something that we do, but it's more, research conducted within creative processes, so to speak, in general. So that it can be UX, but it can also be on product experience, product design. And in our approach, as we've mentioned before, we're mixing quantitative and qualitative research, but we're also including methods from various fields such as psychology, sociology, design, engineering, and of course UX. And this kind of helps us, open up for a holistic understanding of the project challenges that we're faced with. And it also helps us, and that's one of the crucial parts, to mitigate biases to some degree. So research along the process, this is one example that all of you probably know. We sometimes use a user-centered design approach, depending on the project, and we as a research team always try to empower people to make informed decisions along the creative process. And by doing so, we kind of help develop relevant and sustainable solutions. So that's kind of one thing that we're really about. We're trying to get relevance in there, and we're trying to get sustainability in there. And then we usually, not necessarily only the research team, but all the stakeholders involved are tailoring the approach to leverage the right insights. So that's kind of key to our work. So once we've framed the problem, we've got the research question right, we have kind of a set of methods and tools that we use, and then we go into the project and align and see how we can support each team along the process. So this is, like I said, an example of a user-centered design process. There might be others, or there are others within the company. And so we always try to kind of match that and try to get into the other team's processes and try to give them what they need, So we moved away from, for instance, just giving 100-page research documentation presentations to giving more, kind of small snippets of insights along the way, and because we felt that designers can do a lot more with that. Sometimes people were just looking at us, when we did these presentations, they were like, okay, so what can we do with that? We don't really know, where to start with all this information. So that's kind of the key to break it down into small pieces. So we're kind of helping clients understand different potentials. So one of the things for sure is understanding the market, but also understanding users, understanding future potentials, and to me, with my background, most importantly, understanding impacts. So the range that we cover here is basically from user-centeredness to a more, let's say, society-centered, planet-centered approach, where we also map, for instance, do eco-assessment or map an impact journey and so on. So that's a very important part that we implement more and more into our work. So one of the things, and that's certainly a challenge, is to really implement those types of methods in a process and in a, let's say, a research design driven company, right? So some of the methods that we use, you can see here what the pros are for this approach, kind of pairing up different research methods from qualitative and quantitative. From the qualitative and quantitative side is certainly that we are trying to minimize, okay, now it's getting dark here. See, we're thrown out of our building here. We're minimizing minimizing biases by providing a diversity of perspective. That's something that mixed methods does. We understand complexities and contexts a bit better because we have the macro and the micro perspective. So that's kind of the key for us. And one of the things why we set this up is results can always be clarified, elaborated, and validated against each other. And that's kind of the key of our approach, right? Another thing would be that a more comprehensive use of data usually leads to a more fundamental understanding of the research question. And then, of course, you can, the solution that you're working for it gets a bit more elaborate as well. And we've noticed, we've been putting in lots of small types of methods in projects, and we saw that, sometimes it happens that it's just not successful, that you kind of don't have the right participants, or you have the wrong context, you have the wrong methodology or the wrong method, and you have to adapt that. And to us, it makes it a lot easier when we mix methods to really be flexible on this and to adapt dynamically. And so with this, I will hand over to my colleague, Alicia. She's going to continue.
So as Florian mentioned earlier, we approach research by combining perspectives and disciplines. For instance, we'll often use both data science to collect the quantitative data and user research to collect the qualitative data. So quant research is very useful when it comes to discovering overarching trends, defining scales of our findings. With methods like analytics, we can identify critical issues with a product, but the method alone, quant alone, won't reveal the reasons behind a specific issue. That's why we use qual research, because it's necessary to understand why certain behaviors occur and issues happen. And it also gives us insights on how to fix these issues. So for instance, we'll use methods like qualitative usability testing to help us understand user mental models, and understand also how people perceive and understand a certain design. But alone, qual research won't give us indication on the scale and the importance of a finding that we have. This is why often we combine both the qual and the quant methods to get the fuller picture of what we're working on. For instance, we can pair analytics with qualitative usability testing, or surveys with contextual inquiry, or eco-assessment with sustainability strategy workshops. So now I'm going to show you a specific example of a project where we successfully combined mixed methods. And we use this in order to improve a digital service. For this project, we conducted both qual and quant research to evaluate the online experience of users that were booking a motorcycle test ride. So here we used an explanatory approach, meaning that we started with the quant analysis, and then after this, we performed qual testing to find an explanation behind our findings. More specifically here, we started with web analytics to identify dropouts and other behavioral patterns. And then with this data, we were able to pinpoint specific critical issues at specific steps of the customer journey. And then we conducted a scenario-based usability test to understand the reasons behind these issues. So the behavioral data that we collected here shows that many of the users were dropping out during this final step of the registration when they had to do the booking process. So it really was just the last step. So our original assumption was that our assumption, one of the design team, the one of other stakeholders, was that the registration step was just too long and too complicated. But we still decided to verify that, and we conducted this user testing to check why exactly this was happening. So during the usability tests, many of the users did declare that they would have abandoned during the booking process when on the registration page. But we realized that this was due to a frustration that was built up throughout the entire booking journey. As you can see on the right was the emotional curve. the user unsatisfaction starts from the very first step, and it doesn't really improve during this journey. So the journey is actually due to unmet needs. There's unsatisfaction because the user was expecting more information about the dealer and also about the test ride, and they needed reassurance that the ride would actually happen. So to conclude, for this specific project, our mixed methods approach was useful because it delivered actionable insights. We were able to pinpoint what parts of the customer journey needed most improvement and why. And it also allowed us to go beyond our original assumptions and mitigate certain of the biases that we had. So, are we missing a slide?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, for this, sorry. So for this project, we conducted research on an immobility brand. We did this research to inform the design of a unique customer experience that would differentiate our client's brand on a competitive market. To do so, we did extensive research on the riders, but also on how they were experiencing the service. So for this project, we used a slightly different approach. We did an exploratory research because we knew little about our target group. So we started with qual research that then informed us on how we were going to do our quant approach. So we started with contextual inquiry, ad hoc interviews and observations, and then we used a survey to verify and determine the scale of our initial findings. So during the qual phase, we observed and interviewed riders during the rental of the bikes. To better understand our participants, we followed them during the entire journey from the start to the end. Then we analyzed the transcripts of the observations and interviews that we had. We used thematic coding and did affinity mapping to generate clusters. And we categorized, we created categories like use cases and related user segments. And one of our findings was that a lot of the riders were daily commuters. So then we moved to the quant phase of our research, and we used themes that we identified in order to determine the questions of our survey. With the survey results, we were able to confirm and also quantify the use cases that we identified originally. And as you can see with the plot on the right, there were a lot of people who completed the survey that used their bike every day and only for a very short period of time. And this corresponds to the most important use case that we have, which is the daily commuting. So with the survey results, we were able to validate most of our user segments because our quant data matched the qual findings that we had. And we also discovered that one of our user segment that we created only represented a very small portion of the population. So we decided to discontinue it because it wasn't significant enough. So for this project, adding the quant perspective to our initial qual findings was valuable because we got information on the distribution of our segment, and it also helped us to help the design team prioritize and decide what features to focus on and have the most impact. So to sum up our presentation, doing research at KISKA leads to interesting challenges like working in collaboration with a wide variety of teams who all speak a different disciplinary language. We are setting up a multidisciplinary research group to respond to the diversity of projects and teams at KISKA. And so we use a set list of methods and tactics, but then we select the appropriate ones and we tailor our approach for each project. We always define an optimal setup so that we can fit our clients' challenges and also the needs of our internal teams. Our mixed methods approach helps us to tackle some of the biases that we have in research and also deliver a holistic perspective that informs strategic decisions along the creative process. Thank you for listening. I'll be happy to discuss this further during the Q&A.